Hey everyone. So this video is accompanying the assignment asking you to fill out a contract for what you're going to do for your creative project this semester. And you may be confused as to what exactly that even means. Like, what is this creative project thing? Especially if you were in English 201 before taking this class. In the introductory video I did in week 1, I mentioned a bit of a twist this semester. That twist comes in the form of this additional assignment, in addition to the quizzes and exams that you'll take over the course of the semester, uh, of the creative project. Now, what do I mean? Well, in your syllabus, that's what I have pulled up here, the very last page, that is page 5 of the syllabus, are the outlines. This is the guidelines, rather, for the creative project. All right, so I'm going to kind of read through this and do some additional explaining as I go. So as it says here, in English 201 and 202, you are introduced to music, literature, painting, sculpture, and architecture from ancient times through the present. Now you are being asked to design and complete a work of art that is yours. This work may be in any of the arts: music, literature, painting, sculpture, architecture, photography. It says not scrapbooking, but I'll get to that in a moment. Mosaics, etc. There are 2 stipulations. 1, the artwork must give evidence of an entire semester's work in concept, execution, and presentation. And 2, the artwork must be created primarily for beauty, not for utility. So no painted mailboxes or sweatshirts, no clocks, no footstools, etc. Okay, so what am I saying here? Well, this semester you're going to be asked to create something of your own. It can be in any of the arts that were just listed there, because we've discussed them all in this class. Well, maybe not so much photography. Photography we'll get to later this semester. But you're going to be asked to put together some sort of a project that should showcase that you've spent a semester working on it. Right? Now, it says music, literature, painting, sculpture, architecture, photography, not scrapbooking. Right? How do I put this? Some of the rules that are sort of in stipulations that are placed on these creative projects are mainly because the goal here is to encourage you guys to explore the arts as opposed to just purely crafting. Now, any of you who may have had me in 201 or have had me in other art classes may already know what I'm about to say here, but that like art and craft are things that were sort of separated back in like the Middle Ages thereabouts, and in more recent years, the distinctions between the two have become wibbly wobbly. And so if I had my way, there'd be certain things I would say I don't care. But for the purposes of this assignment and to keep what you guys are doing consistent with what's happening in the in-person classroom, we say things like no scrapbooking. All right. So if you're going to put together a series of photographs, find some means of presenting those photographs that isn't just like a scrapbook kind of thing, whether they be framed, whether they be mounted. We have allowed like actual like photo albums that are meant for photographs to sort of slide into, things of that nature. Then it says the artwork must be created primarily for beauty, not for utility, right? So we're not trying to create things in this particular case that are meant primarily for their use, right? There have, of course, been students who built tables for this project, right? But if the table's first and foremost priority, if the person working on this table, if their first and foremost priority is to make it functional, right, purely just functional table that one can sit at and use, that's not the point of this assignment. If, however, and this has been the case, that table is meant to look beautiful and be a piece of artwork meant to be looked at and enjoyed, but then could also be useful as a table, that makes sense. That's fine. I get that. So, for instance, there was a student who had a table that they had put together themselves and built themselves, but then the entire top of that table became a canvas onto which they painted. There have been those who sort of cut cross sections out of really large trunks of trees that have interesting ring patterns, or maybe there's been some disease or burning that got into that tree and it made for this interesting, once a cross section was cut from that, it made for this interesting surface and then created that into a table and then stained it and things of that nature. right? So that's what we mean when we say that there should be beauty first, right? But also the work needs to be yours. We're going to get into the stuff that's coming up here in a moment, but this is something that's not listed here that I really do want to put out there. The work needs to be yours, right? We don't want to, of course, we don't want any work that you had someone else do for you. That's in and of itself a given. But also, we we're not we don't want to see artwork you have done by looking at someone else's artwork and then copying that. Now, that may frustrate you when we get to some of the things that we're going to talk about that happened in the 20th century as far as art goes. And I get it, I get it, I get it. You'll see what I'm talking about when we get there. Um, well, I'll just sort of briefly say you're going to find a lot of artists who are all about looking at pre-existing works and sort of bringing them into conversation by making their own thing based on that thing that already exists. But for the purposes of this assignment, because we got to have some rules on here, this needs to be your work, and so we're not just copying something that we've seen someone else do. Um, it should be a little more complex than say, you've gone on Instagram and you've seen someone doing crayon melting art by sticking a bunch of crayons on a canvas and hitting it with a hairdryer and melting it, and boom, there I have an artwork. There it is. Right? It should be more complex than that. However, right, everybody has their own level of expertise. In fact, one of the questions on the contract that we're going to talk about in a moment is how much experience you have in the thing that you're planning to do. And so, one of the questions that often gets asked by students is whether or not the work is going to be graded on quote unquote how good it looks, right? How realistic or whatever, right? And the answer to that is no, with caveats. Because, as it says there, it should be indicative of an entire semester's worth of work. Now, so you may be deciding to paint, and it may be the first time you have ever painted anything. And so I get it. The amount of effort for you, having never painted anything, over the course of a semester, right, may not necessarily be 100% on level comparable to something that has been produced by someone who is very practiced in painting, has had lots of lessons and what have you, and what that person accomplishes over the course of a semester. But I often see things that are submitted for the creative projects that I know from looking at the student worked on it the night before it was due and crapped it out in a matter of a couple of hours and put it out there for the world to see. That can affect your grade. All right, this is something that should take place over the course of a semester. Now, at the end of this semester, dates we'll talk about in a moment. This project will be due. There'll be a specific date again that we'll talk about, and it will go into an exhibition here on campus. It'll be in DFAB, room 101 in DFAB. All the work will go there in a big exhibition of all of the projects, not only done by you guys in this course, but by those in the other sections that are in person. So that said, like I mentioned, it can be apparent when someone has just sort of thrown something together at the last minute, because between now and when it is due, there are going to be some benchmarks that you're going to be asked to meet. So let me dive into that. So first off is that contract. It's attached to, this video is attached to that assignment. When you sign and submit your contract, you're pledging yourself to the plan. Be sure that the contract is completed before you turn it in. You will not be allowed to change the total nature of the project after the contract is signed. For example, you may change the exact design of the painting, but you may not change from painting to pottery. Right? So, in this contract, we're going to ask some specific questions about what you're planning to do. And understand that before you get the points for completing this contract, we may have questions. We may need, Professor McIntosh and or myself may have questions about what exactly you're going to do. We may have some clarification questions we need. It happens. Sometimes you think you have described very well what you're planning, and then the person reading it has no clue, can't visualize at all what you're planning to do. And so we may ask questions about it. And so what happens is that some students get very concerned that whatever they have written down, when they later on find themselves struggling to do that thing, that's going to harm them because they can't change their minds. Well, now, certain things you can change, right? So if you decide that you're going to do a painting, let's say, and I don't know, as an example, you decide in the contract to say you want to make a painting of the house that you grew up in, right? You have an old photograph you're using as a reference, what have you, right? And as you begin working on that painting, you realize that you struggle with painting things that are architectural. So much so that it has lost any of its appeal to you. You have no joy in doing it anymore. Well, in that case, reach out to us. I'll talk in a moment about how you're going to be sort of assigned to one or the other of us, but reach out to whoever that person is and let us know, because it might be that you're like, I don't want to paint this house anymore. Can I change and do something else? And if what you're trying to change over to, let's say, is, I don't know, photography, or you would rather write a book of poems, we might tell you no on that, right? Because that's changing the complete nature of what you contracted yourself to do. But if you would instead like to do a painting of, I don't know, the pond that's in the backyard of the house that you grew up in, yeah, well, you're sticking to the idea of painting. You're even kind of sticking to the concept and idea behind what you were planning to do as far as the painting goes. And we're cool with that. We'll give you the A-OK on that. All right? But it says, note that each step must be completed before the next step may be taken. You may not submit your project if you have not presented a progress report, for instance, nor may you bring a completed project to the progress report conference. Right? This is what I was just talking about a moment ago. All the projects will be presented in Waddle Recital Hall. That's DFAB room 101. Students must sign in for viewing Monday afternoon or evening unless otherwise arranged with the instructor. We'll remind you of that as the time gets close. 10 points will be deducted from your project score if you choose not to view the finished projects. Audio or video performances will be recorded for playing at will be recorded for playing at intervals when the room is open to the public, and other works will be displayed on the walls or tables. All right, so I'll get to that. Let's talk first about the points. All right, this project is worth 200 points in total. All right, turning in your completed contract on time, which is due before January 28th, right? Which, when you click on the link, you're going to be taken to a Google form. You'll fill it out and get it back to us before January 28th, and bam, that's 10 points. Get it any later than that, and those points will be reduced. If you're really late on getting it back to us, you might even get down to a 0. All right. Definitely, if we don't get a contract at all from you, then, as it says up here, you have to complete each step before you move on to the next. So if you don't submit a contract, you don't do any of this, you don't submit this at all, and 200 of the 1,000 total points that you can receive in this class are a 0. So don't do that to yourself. Then it says a project conference, which is worth 50 points. That's a huge chunk. Now, project conference. So once you fill out your contract, Professor McIntosh and I are going to read over those. As I said, we may send questions back to you, asking you to answer something that we're maybe not quite certain about. Once we approve your idea, you get your 10 points, and then you will all sort of be sorted, very Harry Potter style, into either a group of students who will come to me for their conferences, or a group of students who will go to Professor McIntosh for their conferences. So that conference, there'll be a certain time, right? It's usually the week after spring break, I want to say. I could be wrong about that, but I believe that's the case. You know what? I can scan up and see. If I go up to the schedule, yeah. So right here, week 9, project conferences begin. So it'll be these 2 weeks here, weeks 9 and 10. That's after we return from spring break. The conference is a short meeting that you have with either Professor McIntosh or myself, depending on who you've been assigned to. But also, over the course of the semester, any questions you have about this project as you're working should be addressed to that particular person. So if you're in my group, you got a question or a concern, or you need help with something, reach out to me. If you're in Professor McIntosh's group, all the same applies to her, right? That very short conference that you'll have, right, there should be progress, because we're at the midway point of the semester. So what you're bringing in should be well on its way. It doesn't need to be completed, nor are you going to be turning it in, but it should be well on its way. If you're walking in and you have nothing, that's a big problem. I've had many a conference where a student walked in and said, all right, so what I'm thinking about doing is, and I had to say, no, stop. Thinking about doing it should have been long gone. Right? You should be doing by now. And so if you show up for your meeting on time, if you have progress on the work, and you're there and ready to talk about the work and converse with me and listen to any ideas I may have and address any questions that I may have, that's your 50 points right there, right? But any of those things isn't quite met, and those 50 points get reduced, right? Say, if you show up but you barely have anything that you've worked on, I might knock that down a few points, right? Or if you don't seem to have much to say about the work, or we try to have a conversation with you, but you're just sort of sitting there like a lump on along, I might bump those points down quite a bit. If you show up for the conference, and I'm looking over here, by the way, because that's where the chair that you will sit in if you come to my office, that's where it is. You show up and you have nothing, but you're willing to talk about what you're planning to do. I can give you some points, but I'm not giving you that full 50 because you should have had at least half a semester's worth of work done by then. That conference, as we'll explain as we get closer, can be scheduled to be in person, or it can be scheduled to be done online through Zoom. That's our preferred method that we will use. Then turning in a completed project on time, that is 40 points, just turning it in, right? Like it doesn't have to be good. That's one of the things that seems to hold students back sometimes, right? Like if it just needs to be the best that you yourself could do, right? To get those 40 points, you just turn it in on time. You don't turn it in on time, you don't get those 40 points. Simple as that. Then we grade the work based on originality, skill, beauty, that sort of thing. That's 100 points. Now, again, as I mentioned before, right, I know that Professor McIntosh and I will certainly be doing this. We are going to keep in mind the skill level you have presented and the amount of effort and work that has gone into the piece that you have, as well as how you thought about how you wanted it presented. I mean, that's kind of it, right? And so what will be bringing down that 100 points is really going to be a lack of effort on your part. If it's clear that you've not put enough effort into it, you've given us something that was very shoddily put together, because again, you either waited till the last minute, or again, another possibility is if we are either strongly suspicious or it is very obvious that you are turning in work that is not yours. That's where these 100 points will be reduced down to 0 if we believe that you have submitted work that is not your own. Right? That brings the total possible points to 200. Right? Well, now, simple enough, all of that. Some special circumstances come up. Some of you aren't on campus. Talk to us about those things. We'll see what we can work out. Right? Other circumstances to keep in mind. If you are going to paint, or really do anything that is two-dimensional, painting or drawing, right? We'll talk about photography in a moment. The work should be a minimum of 16 inches by 20 inches. It can be larger, but it can't be any smaller than that. If you're working smaller, but there are multiple panels that would equate a larger scale than 16 by 20, that works. Now, photography. Now, if you're going to do just one big photograph, cool. If you want to print one at 16 by 20 or larger, fine. But we generally suggest that if you're going to do photography, you do a series of photographs. Those photographs really need to be printed. We've been able to work with students who needed to present theirs digitally, but if it's just like one or two photographs, that becomes a bit of a problem. Right? I would suggest, if you're working in photography, do a series on some sort of subject. Right? If you're going to work in sculpture, your piece shouldn't be some little tiny thing. Make it, bigger. If it's going to be something that is written, it should be bound in something, whether that be in a three-pronged kind of thing, or some sort of essay folder with a little bit that slides down the side, whatever, right? We want it to look good. It shouldn't just look like it's been slapped together in some sort of binder and just thrown out there, right? Make the thing look good. If it's going to be a musical performance or a video, because we didn't mention video here, but video can be done, what you submit should equal no less than 10 minutes, right? So that if you make music, and students have found this weird in the past, either you want to record a few songs that would add up to at least 10 minutes, or if you only want to do one song, that thing needs to be a 10-minute song, at least. And video is the same way. If you're going to do a video, you should be aiming for 10 minutes at least. Longer is fine. And again, if you are off campus, like you don't live on campus, reach out to us and talk to us. We can sort of figure out how we'll go about getting your work on display, how we might go about that. All right, so again, some important things to keep in mind. The contract due date is before January 28th. That's the first thing. You have to do that in order to do the progress report, which, man, how did I not see that it said it right there? Week 9. The project is due on Monday, April 8th. There'll be a block of time from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. for you to submit the work to, again, DFAB Room 101. Then the work will be on exhibition for a couple of days. after which you'll come and pick up the work on Wednesday, April 10th until noon on Thursday, April 11th. Right? Those will be the pickup days for you to come back and get the work. You'll also be asked to, where was it? You need to have attended. It says Monday afternoon or evening, but we've also allowed for people to come in on Tuesdays. Why is that? Go away. All right. All right. Well, forget it. Students must sign in for viewing Monday afternoon or evening unless otherwise arranged with the instructor. 10 points will be deducted from your project score if you choose not to view the finished projects. So at some point, come by and sign in saying, I have been here and looked at the work. We require that as part of the project. If you don't, then we deduct 10 points from whatever amount you have earned. Right? Simple as that. All right. So anyway, I know that was a ton of information. If you have any further questions that I have not answered, please leave a comment on this assignment and ask those questions. Click on the link in this assignment and fill in the contract. That is where we begin this whole thing. And then from there, we will move right along. Right? Don't stress yourself too much about this. Okay. Some students will get so stressed out that it paralyzes them and they get nothing done. All right. We're not looking for masterpieces. I'm not going to be comparing what you have done to the great Renaissance master artists, right? You will be compared to what we have seen your capabilities to be over the course of the semester and whether or not you have put the real effort into getting that work done. All right. Any further questions, please reach out to us. Otherwise, take care. I'm really excited. I can't wait to see what kinds of things you guys have in mind that you'd like to do. I always look forward to reading these and seeing what you guys are capable of. All right. That's it. You guys take care. Bye.